first International Conference on Science and Technology Indicators. I'm pleased, as Rector of the Universitat Politècnica, Valencia, I'm pleased to share this head table with Professor Jordi Molas, Deputy Director of the Institute of Innovation and Knowledge Management, Ingenio, a joint research institute between Universitat Politècnica, Valencia and the Research Spanish Council, and Professor Sakiko Fukuda from the New School, New York, that will open with the conference, with the speech about the power of numbers, a critical review of MDG targets for human development. Firstly, I give the floor to the conference chair, Dr. Jordi Molas.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Valencia. It's a pleasure to see so many known faces, and if I may say, so it's a pleasure to see so many unknown faces. I must say we have made an effort to maybe bring new communities into this conference. It's the 21st year of the Science and Technology Indicators Conference, but we have struggled to increase maybe what we could call its diversity. And one issue would be why it's diversity important. Our feeling is, and it's in the theme somehow of the conference, that diversity is important because in the processes that concern us, which is basically the application, the generation of knowledge and the application of knowledge to the achievement of well-being, many, many actors are involved, and are involved from different perspectives and from different situations. So we thought it was important to broaden up the scope of what have been traditionally our conference. And so, for instance, we will have in this conference tracks on innovation, tracks on benchmarking innovation, on indicators for innovation policy, on innovation in government, and we have tried to give these tracks a high profile. As you know, this is a conference that has been very much revolving around bibliometric indicators. We think this is crucial, this is important, this will keep being the core of the conferences now and in the future, but I would like to welcome the new additions, people working perhaps in new areas, and of course also from new regions, new places in the world. The conference, our association is called European, but in fact the scope that we try to achieve is more global, more international. The conference is, as you know, on peripheries. That's the topic. It's this idea that indicators may not cover equally all areas of interest, all areas of importance, that some areas are not so well covered and that tend to be peripheral to the centers of knowledge, to the centers of generation of wealth. And that's in a way the core concept that runs through the mainstream, some of the core presentations, they say the plenaries, and in the tracks. We have tracks on social science and humanities, for instance, that can be considered a bit like a peripheral area of knowledge. And so it's a conference that it is a bit different, as I say, with new people coming in to whom I would like to extend a special welcome. Just a few numbers. What I've been told yesterday, we are quite a few. That's, you know, indicators of STI seems to be a bit of a niche thing, which is with a small group of geeks maybe are interested in that. No, here we are, I think, 380, I've been told, registered, and from many, many parts of the world. I think we have 45 countries, I've been told. We have people from Benin, from South Africa. We have more than a dozen participants each from Canada, from Brazil, from China, of course from many European countries, the Netherlands, France, Britain, the usual suspects somehow, the ones that are closer to us. But I appreciate that people have made the effort to fly long distances to be here, and I just hope that those who have come a long way have found their effort rewarded by the end of the conference in 3 days. So I hope you enjoy. I hope that we all learn together, and it's my best wishes for for the conference. And I passed, oh yes, I think that's very important. I will pass the word to the rector. I cannot do that without thanking the rector and the university for their help. I mean, I can say that without the help of the university, we would not be here. It's the infrastructure, it's where we are, it's all the rooms, it's the technical support, it's the support we have received in press, in distribution. It has been really well beyond our expectations. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that without the support of the university, this conference would not have been possible. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Universitat Politècnica de Valencia, it's a great pleasure to hold an event of these characteristics, of such international relevance. I would like to thank you all for being here today, and I express my gratitude to the organizing committee, the program board, the scientific committee, and of course, to everyone who is participating in the conference, and doubly making it a great success. I also wish to extend my special thanks to our international guests and keynote speakers, Professor Sakiko Fukuda-Parr and Johan Mouton. And of course, and finally, to the conference chairs, Professor Jordi Molas, Vice President of Ingenio. You have done a great job. You have invested a lot of time to organize this conference, and the result is very, very good. This conference will serve as a valuable international platform from which to share knowledge related to the challenges presented by science and technology indicators that are used for areas that are marginal to hubs of economics, scientific or technological activity. This platform will aim to identify and encourage development of indicators oriented to the specific requirements of these peripheries that include certain fields of knowledge. The nature of the analysis of this indicator is essential due to their capacity to effectively shape your reality. Therefore, the conference encompasses a wide scope of possible topics for discussion, including the use of indication for innovation policy infrastructures, for inclusive open science, international benchmarking, university-industry relations, as well as other specific issues related to careers and gender. At the Universitat Politècnica de Valencia, we use indicators for a long time, at personal and collective level, for teaching, research, and innovation activity. All of them are in permanent discussion, as is usual in universities. And there are people against the indicators, and always every year the debate never is closed, and we are running some indicator from almost 20 years ago. One of them, our research activity index for every professor and also for the structures, from research institutes or departments. You can have an idea of it in one poster that will be presented in this conference, and you can know in detail this indicator. But always in the university, any indicator has controversies, and it's true. There is no perfect one for it. Fortunately, our university counts with a very good research institute as Ingenio, with very high-level researchers in the field of science and innovation policies and strategies and indicators. And sometimes we follow their recommendations, so we pay attention to their recommendations. I hope that during your stay with us, you have a nice stay. You can know more Universitat Politècnica de Valencia. Please feel free to contact with us if you want to know some details about our teaching activities or research activities, our labs, some departments. We are a university, a specialized university, mainly focused on science and engineering. This is 19% of our student bachelor and master degree are in science or engineering. But also we have fine arts and business administration. This is a good mix. We are happy with the synergy we established with these degrees. And in fact, this year we have started a new degree between art and technology, people from science and technology and artists. Creative technologies for design. We started just 1 week ago, and with very high demand of students. We received almost 1,000 applicants for 100 places. Dear guests, I thank you all for coming to Universitat Politècnica de Valencia. I hope the conference lives up all your expectations, and I wish you an enjoyable stay and a productive stay here in the city of Valencia. Thank you for your kind attention. And now, I give the floor to Professor Jordi Molas to introduce Professor Sakiko. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your kind words. The first plenary speaker will be Professor Sakiko Fukuda-Parr. I am very grateful to her for having accepted our invitation, even more so when I learn about her traveling schedule and what we have subjected her to. I mean, she arrived yesterday from New York, I think, and then in the evening was already giving a lecture here. She's giving a lecture this morning, and then late at night she takes a flight to go to Bath, which is a very pretty place, but is very far from the airport. So she will have a very long day. And I appreciate that you've come all the long way to Valencia to just be with us and discuss issues that have to do with numbers and indicators. This invitation, it follows a trend in the STI Conference. It started some years ago to invite keynote speakers that are not our usual suspects, that are not quite, the core of our, so I wouldn't call it a discipline, it's the core of our area of work, but who work in areas that are neighboring and are very interesting for our problems, that in fact we have a commonality of problems. And I think one such case is the presentation we are going to hear today. Professor Fukuda-Parr, I think, is known worldwide for contributions to development, her work on human development, poverty, inequality. If we had to label her, I hate labels, but I guess the label we would put in this case is a development economist, maybe. Yep, development economist. She has extensive experience in field work. She's worked in South Africa, Brazil, nameless countries. She's got, when you look at her CV, which by the way is in Wikipedia, so that's good. Her CV in Wikipedia, the list of universities she has worked for is like the A list you can think of. It's Columbia. It's Columbia there? Yes, Columbia, Harvard, everything. Of course, the newest school in New York. And many, many positions related to development in the United Nations Development Program. And particularly, she's known as the lead author of the Human Development Report that was, I have the note here, between 1995 and 2004, and in the work she's done for in the development of the Millennium Development Goals. That's an area where a large effort has been made, and huge debate has ensued on the measurement of these goals, I guess. And if we think, or we acknowledge that development goals expressed, for instance, in terms of human development, can also be, or maybe should be, the goals of science, technology, and innovation policies, then their measurement becomes a topic for this conference. And therefore, it's a pleasure to have Professor Sakiko Fukuda-Parr. I give you the floor. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for this very kind introduction and for the invitation to be here this morning at the opening session of this very interesting conference. It's my first visit to Valencia, and so I was been enjoying a rapid view of the city since yesterday, tasting your wonderful paella and admiring the beautiful buildings. I'm particularly fascinated by the idea of this conference, which is about the peripheries, frontiers, and beyond. My presentation is going to be about the power of indicators and numbers to distort realities. And a sociologist called Theodore Porter said that indicators are supposed to be numeric representations of a social reality, but then they can end up redefining that social reality. And so it is, in fact, with the Millennium Development Goals that tried to define poverty, but then I think ended up redefining the meaning of poverty. That's the essential message of my presentation. I have been very concerned about these Millennium Development Goals. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with what they are. The MDGs, they were the 8 goals set in 2001 to be achieved by 2015. There were 8 of them, and they were in areas of education, like putting every child in school, halving poverty, combating global diseases, but they all had numeric targets. And so I have had a sort of a love-hate relationship with numbers and indicators, social science measurement, for a long time, because as Jordi mentioned, I was the director of the Human Development Reports, which are known for the Human Development Index. And of course, we wrote the Human Development Reports as interesting analytical reports to look at big global challenges of the day, such as economic growth, poverty, globalization, new technologies, democracy, cultural identity, and so forth. And yet, every year, all that the journalists could care about was this thing called the Human Development Index, and where the country that they were located in placed itself, whether Spain was number 10 or number 5 or number 15, for example. And so the people used to call the Human Development Report the HDI report, and this was just a little table at the annex of the report. But the HDI, because of the power of numbers, actually, was the thing that attracted attention. So this was the reason for my love-hate relationship over now about 20 years with numbers. And so when the MDGs came along, I kept on thinking that these numbers had both positive and negative effects, and that's essentially what I am going to talk about. Now, because the MDGs were considered to have been so spectacularly successful in drawing attention, the thing about the MDGs is that they were launched in 2001, and nobody at that point thought that they would have any traction, because they were part of the work of the UN, they were part of a report, and there are so many declarations. They were introduced in the Millennium Declarations and in 2000. And there's so many declarations like that get adopted at the General Assembly that have a shelf life of about 2 days. You know, they're adopted, and then the following day, maybe people talk about it, but after that, it's actually in the basement somewhere. But for years afterwards, people kept on talking about the MDGs, and this became a sort of a consensus framework for thinking about development in the international community. And politicians would make speeches about how, you know, for example, with the financial crisis, we would not achieve the MDGs, or that with the food price hikes, we would not achieve the MDGs. So the MDGs gained political traction in a way that UN efforts to draw attention to poverty and development never did. And so for people in the leadership of international debates about development, people who are at the head, for example, of the World Bank or the UN Development Program, or many, and particularly development ministers of Europe, people like Evelyn Herfkens, who was Minister of Development of the Netherlands, Claire Short, who was Secretary for International Development in the UK, these numbers were very important and very useful. And they acquired over 15 years kind of a tremendous appeal, such that they have become the way in which international agreements about common consensus priorities came to be defined. And so when the MDGs expired in 2015, they had to be followed by a new set of goals. And the process for defining and developing these new set of goals was one of the most remarkable mobilizing moments in international development that I have ever witnessed over the 30 years or so that I've been in this field. So these global goals have now become the mechanism, the methodology that the international community has decided to use in order to define international priorities for development. I think that the whole point about these sets of goals, MDGs and SDGs, is they attempt to be comprehensive and they define the most important priorities in something called development. They are internationally agreed. They are negotiated at the UN General Assembly by 200 governments. They express norms. They express what you should be doing, what is desirable. So there are value statements. But the justification for using them is that they have this power of numbers, that the quantification helps communicate the idea of what you should be doing. You say halve poverty in half, and then you can communicate what you actually mean by development and what development is supposed to do. So the simple statement using numbers is the reason why you want to use global goals. But there are some, and also the quantitative indicators are appealing in the modern thought process and modern management and modern governance because, you know, we're all supposed to be doing evidence-based analysis, evidence-based policy making. So quantitative indicators must produce this kind of evidence-based policy, and they are moreover not location specific, and therefore 200 countries around the world can agree on a common set of standards that can apply, that can be meaningful, whether you are in Valencia or in Bogota or in Kathmandu. And so this ability of numbers to abstract from local realities is another important reason why these indicators are very appealing in international policy dialogue. And, but there is a problem. So the strengths of global goals and of the MDGs was that they should be simple, measurable, and focus on outcomes. But there are basic problems of using indicators to describe social objectives. And that is that you have this inherent reductionism of quantification and something that is intangible. You know, one of the objectives is empower women. Well, you know, that's not something that is tangible. It's the way that women feel, that women act, that it's a sort of the ability to do things. Agency of women is an important part of empowerment. How do you measure that? It's really intangible, but then you pretend that it is something that can be quantified, and so you pick an indicator, and in this case it was equal enrollment in primary and secondary schools, and that somehow that's supposed to be an indicator of empowerment. The problem also in development of looking at just outcomes is that it doesn't focus on the key means by which to achieve those important outcomes. over which there is a lot of debate and controversy. And they are inadequate for transformative social change. Development, reducing poverty, these are processes of social change that require some real fundamental transformative change in society, in economy, in politics. But it's difficult to reflect them in numbers. And another basic problem is that because people take these targets literally and apply them to national situations or to their programs, they then become used as hard planning targets, when in fact these goals were supposed to be used for as a communications tool for mobilizing attention and for monitoring progress. Now I'll get into some of those issues as we move along. So one of the reasons why there is this, so one of the problems with this issue of simplicity, that there is a belief, a common consensus opinion of global goals is that they are the most effective when they are brief. And so there is a lot of criticism of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that most economists consider to be bloated and too numerous. But there are, on the other hand, other perspectives on the MDGs that I love this quote that was made from Peggy Atribus, a feminist, when she said about the MDGs back in about 2002 or 3. I think MDGs as the most distracting gimmicks, as distraction from much more important Beijing platform for action and its 12 priority areas of concern, which represents a much closer approximation of the complexity of the relationship between gender equality and women's empowerment and other MDG targets. So I know you cannot read this, but this is just a sort of a visual representation of the fact that in 1995, I beg your pardon, there was the Beijing Conference on Women and Development, and one of the big international conferences of the 1990s on development issues. And they negotiated and adopted a 13-point agenda. So the idea of the MDGs was to just pick a number to represent this 13-point agenda, and they picked the quantitative targets that were there, included in this 13-point agenda. It was 13-point with many sub-points. So, you know, the ratio of girls to boys in primary and secondary and tertiary education was one, and the literacy rate of 15 to 24-year-olds, women and men, was the other. But, you know, there's so much that the MDGs actually did not pick up that was so much more, what was very important, like vocational training, anti-discrimination, education reform, lifelong learning, even in the area of gender and education. So I think that this whole issue of using numbers to represent important development priorities is a sort of it reflects an inherent contradiction in itself. So that, you know, for an economist like Charles Kenny, you know, that the success of the MDGs, that we're still talking about them, is that they were simple, consensual, numerical, and time-bound. And yet, realizing after 10 years of the MDGs that there was a problem, the proposal in the to create the SDGs